All right, then also hello from my side. I'm actually very happy to also introduce our speakers that are together with me on a stage today to discuss about cybersecurity and how the government sector could actually help and support our startup sector to tackle their issues. So the first person that I have together with me on the stage here is none other than former President of Estonia, Mr. Toomas Ilves. And a little side note, not just the former President of Estonia, but personally speaking, a massive influence from me, not to become a president in the future, but working in the cybersecurity. So have a say here. And the second speaker that I'm very, very happy to introduce all the way from Denmark, Mr. Peter Brahe, who is the chief of CEO, who is working at the Institut for Cybersecurity in Denmark, as I said. So we're also happy to welcome you here. And obviously, last but not least here, we have wonderful Marki Tihhonova-Kreek, who is the CEO of CTF Tech. Happy to have you. All right, so when we would start here, and I always like to bring also some of the statistics just to give the conversation a great start. When we think about the World Economic Forum's 2021's Global Risk Report, and you know that this indicated that cybersecurity failure was the fourth most popular answer when it comes to responders were asked what global society's biggest threat was. So if we would think about this in this perspective, we know that also startups have really raised their budget when it comes to also investing to cybersecurity. But what do you think if you put yourself into the shoes, or speaking of let's start from the Danish view here. What are the biggest challenges that your startups are facing today when it comes to the increasing amount of cyber threats?
There's a long list of issues that you struggle with regarding if you're a startup or you've been in the business for a long time. And all companies start like building a church that eventually turns into a cathedral. You're focusing on all the great things your business can do, the change it will create, but you don't scope your foundation accordingly to the future. That means that if you see cybersecurity investments at something on top of your business, instead of something which is integrated in your business, you lose focus of your foundation. So attention of the CEO is one of the big trends I see working with the global business leaders out there. We see so many, and Marki can talk about that, awareness programs, initiatives that the company is doing, but it's sometimes flavor of the day. So we do awareness trainings the next month, and then you lose focus of it. And if the CEO is not dedicated to protecting the company, how can you expect the employees to follow? So that's one of the biggest trends that we're working with companies to solve. The other one has to do with prioritizing your cybersecurity investments. There's a long list of things you can invest in. And if I can bring out a couple of examples, I was working with a company who was acquiring a gaming company. It was a super cool app. The target group was girls 8 to 14 years old, interested in horses, fair and narrow segment. It was super cool product, very popular on the market, but there was no authentication when you entered the game. They wanted to make it easy for the girls to get in. How many have girls roughly that age? Yeah. Sexual predators in the gaming apps that your girls go into is kind of an issue here. So regardless how much money that app could generate, just one predator inside that app and the whole investment is gone. And another gaming app where you had 14 developers, all access to the source code in GitHub, they shared the credentials, and there was no backup. I mean, even how cool the investment can be, if you don't have backup, if you don't sort out who has access to the core of the investments, you risk investing in the wrong things. So prioritizing and attention is the biggest trends I see.
All right. Maybe we're moving over to the president here. Mr. Ilves, what do you think? What do you see when it comes to especially the startup sector? do they face a similar kind of like also challenges than the public sector? As you used to be president for 10 years and you're an expert in cybersecurity. I see as a massive issue right now that maybe like the management boards and also maybe ministers or people that are working in a high positions and also public sector do not prioritize this enough or do not understand about like the aspect of cybersecurity enough to order to prioritize also spendings. What do you think about that?
Well, I could talk for the rest of the hour, but number one, just so you know, I mean, Estonia has been under constant DDoS bombardment for the last 90 days since the end of February, but you haven't noticed it. And that's because the government has been dealing with it. I mean, this is 15 years after the massive DDoS attacks that took down everything here. But the point is that, as opposed to what I heard here before, the government has a big role in all of this. But the private sector does too. I mean, the thing is that, first of all, the private sector needs to worry about things because, I mean, if you don't, I mean, your website can't be accessed. I mean, that's one thing with DDoS. But I think that insufficient attention has been paid to security, just as you said. But I mean, if you take this, probably one of the worst cases, the Equifax hack of, 5-6 years ago, in which a company which had the financial records for 150 million Americans, and they said, "Oh, well, we'll patch. There's a problem, but we'll patch it. You know, in a little later." They didn't patch it. It was all stolen. It was all. I mean, the information was taken. It was not stolen. It was just copied, and I mean that the kind of liabilities you will face. Financial liabilities, if you do not take care of your cybersecurity end, are enormous, and you can just, I mean, kiss your startup goodbye if, in fact, you have not paid attention to that and if you have not spent money on it. The thing with cybersecurity is that unlike, and this is especially true for governments to realize, is that it is unlike other sectors in that OPEX, or operational expenditures, are far, far more important than CAPEX, which is capital expenditures. The government thinks too often in terms of, okay, we're going to put this many 100 million into building a road, but once the road is done, I mean, we'll fix it up with potholes for the next 20 years. When it comes to digital issues, be it in the government or outside the government in the private sector, the amount of operating expenditures is much, much larger. And there is this hope always, well, we don't really have to worry about that, or we'll get a cheap vendor who will then use it. Now, finally, in terms of your thing about governments not understanding, this is a fundamental problem that goes back to, I'd say, an essay written by C.P. Snow, a British physical chemist and a literary novelist who coined the term corridors of power. And he wrote an essay in 1959 called The Two Cultures, in which he talks about talking to scientists, because he was a scientist, and then talking to the poets and essayists and novelists, because he was both. But the point is that there is this lack of communication. It has gotten much worse since he wrote the essay. Back then, your phone didn't know where you are. If you left your house, there was no phone. You know, I remember reading Orwell and laughing. How can a television look at you? And then you pull up a computer today. You know, the problem is that governments don't, with some exceptions, I would say. I mean, I'm glad to say this one's one, but governments do not really think. I mean, people don't know much about digital issues, cybersecurity. And so things are not prioritized. At the same time, the tech sector has this attitude of, oh, those stupid people in government, what do they know? And the result can be, at least, it doesn't have to be, but it's It is a real disaster, can be a real disaster for cybersecurity and overall for legislation of digital issues. And I'm proud to say that this is one country where we don't have that problem because there is an constant ongoing dialogue between people in the private sector and the public sector.
All right. I would actually turn into the audience here, and I have a tiny question as we have a lot of also startup founders here. Can you raise the hands of people that are working in some kind of companies, and your company has drastically, in the last few years, raised the budget for cybersecurity? We have one hand here, the other one. Can we see more hands?
About 3 or 4.
See, there is plenty of them coming. Well, congratulations, you're going on the right way. But turning back to you, Marki, as well, we didn't touch that much of the educational part, because when we think about these future leaders, and most of the startup founders here are in their early 20s even, how can we prepare the future generation to be smarter in cyberspace, and especially if they are about to build different new companies, that their products are actually sustainable also when it comes to the security aspect?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You touched upon a very right question. There is an enormous lack of talented cyber experts globally. I think we are talking about numbers more than 3 million of cyber experts whom we need globally, but who are not there. It's not specific even to IT sector or startups specifically. It concerns public sector, private sector, and all different range of sectors, even in agriculture, there are cyber experts needed today. So we need to address this question, and we need to address it now, because against that background, we have a growing number of cyber incidents, ransomware cases. So the problem is not going away. It's simply there. And later on, we will talk about cyber range. I know that Anett wants to touch upon cyber range solutions. One possibility is to use this top technology that is invented, the cyber range solutions, visually attractive solutions for educating our kids. We have to start relatively early, I believe, at the age of 14, maybe even 13, 12, because what is needed is to educate new experts when they haven't still got negative experiences in the cyber world. Because once they are related to, I don't know, dark web, or they have got some bad experiences from a criminal world, it's much more difficult to turn their mind. So that's why we have to start relatively early in a very gamified way, which is somewhat perhaps similar to computer gaming, to attract these young people so that they want to study and at the same time become cyber smart and prevent cyber attacks in the future.
All right. So as you mentioned, yes. So now we already covered the main challenges, and as Peter also said, there is a list of them that we could continue and just talk about 40 minutes about the challenges. But I would mostly like to go for the solution part. And from the Estonian MOD side, you can think about that this is just top secret stuff and very boring that we do there. But we have started one very cool new project, which is called the OCR, so called Open Cyber Range, and we have opened up our cyber range in our CR14 for also startups, so that if you come out with a new project, you are happy and welcome to come and test your new product in Estonian MOD cyber range, so that we open it up for the startups as well, so that they can come. And I'm pretty sure also there are some of the investors here. So as an investor, you also want to make sure that the solution you invest in is secure. And this is also providing this kind of certificate saying that, okay, this company has been tested by the Estonian Ministry of Defense. so it should be okay. So they have kind of figured out already the vulnerabilities on that side. So really, I think this is already the part that the government can play a role there also, just by helping the experience and the exercises part as well. And maybe Peter, you can also talk about a couple of solutions that Denmark has been using, because you also have a background both in public and private sector now. Has there been any kind of very unique cases that you would like to bring it out here?
Yeah, well, my job for the government I can speak less of, but you can connect the dots. We experienced, we needed to grow the talents, but the talents we saw on the market typically came from universities, which are great, but you also learn to think in a specific way. And it's like regulations. It's a minimum standard. It's how it is seen today and not how it's seen tomorrow. And already there we are a step behind the evil hackers, because we'll always lose that battle. So also back to what Marki said, gamification, learning, creating a security culture where it's not regulations or compliance, but it's a way of thinking ahead of the next step. If we can create that knowledge or learning, the future looks bright for the young people. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a lot of initiatives out there doing that. I think it's really great that the government is with the MOD working to set up labs where you can test things, but we're not focusing on the people. Mm-hmm. How do we get kids in at an early stage? I would even go lower, starting in primary school with technology understanding. So it's not just plug and play like my kids. They don't know what's happening. They just plug in. But create some curiosity. Why are things working the way they're working? So you step outside frameworks and create that kind of foundation where we can get ahead of the evil hackers. Mm-hmm. I think we're lacking that in our educational environments right now.
Yeah.
So.
You wanted to comment and reflect?
I mean, in terms of the role of the government, the government also provides a major service here, which is secure communications, used by all the banks in Estonia. It is a government service you're using when you log on to a bank. Mm-hmm. It is far more robust, far stronger than anything you buy commercially. So all kinds of private sector, companies will use this for example, financial transactions. So in fact, there is this, there's this a certain synergy that can develop that in fact the government offers very secure communications, and then at least if you're Estonian or an e-resident, it's very easy for you to use those banking services and so forth, as opposed to, say, when I go into Amazon and then I have just a one-factor authentication with my credit card information there, and I put in my silly password, and I just go, okay, every time I buy a book, it's like, okay. Whereas in Estonia, I never have those concerns. And this is a direction that I think more and more people and countries should be thinking about, and certainly companies, is that if you have a really strong sort of robust system that is supported that is created by the government, that can go quite far.
All right. Should we go to the educational part as well? We are now talking about the solutions, and I know that you are running this cyber patrol, which is absolutely just incredible project that you're doing. So maybe you can talk about this a little bit and what has been the lessons that you have learned since you started also. How many times have this already been going on, like the cyber patrol?
This year we are having it for our third year in Estonian market. But we started from United Arab Emirates 4 years ago with this series of events.
All right, so maybe we can cover this a little bit more to our audience as well, who don't know what the cyber battle is, and then why are you doing this?
Yes, thank you. Cyber battle of any city, any country in the world or any region is something that we need for educational purposes in order to teach not only these kids who are already cyber smart and very familiar with computer games and everything, computer world, but ordinary people, ordinary young people starting from age of 14, 15, who are friends with computers but don't know necessarily that much about cyber yet. So we want to bring them to cyber world because this is something that everybody needs to educate themselves. And we advertise it as an adventure. So we have a lot of boot camps, training sessions. It's like a community thing where young people come together, get to know each other, have a little bit of summer adventure, and at the same time, in a practical way, based on and using technology-wise cyber ranges, they teach, they learn cyber. So our experts teach them cyber. All the tasks that they solve are somehow related to real life, like with silly passwords, credit card incidents, smart city incidents. So it's all related to the real world. It's not some kind of theoretical Linux that they learn about, because again, this is not attractive for them. So once these young people, in Estonia we have 600 plus people attending to this contest this year. Once these young people have already learned something, their adrenaline gets higher, they want to compete. And then we have competition phase that ends up with a big final in the end of October, 29th of October in Tartu. You are invited. It's like a big cyber party that is somehow similar to, for Estonian audience, Eesti otsib superstar or American Idol for English-speaking people. So it's like adventure. Not cyber for only very cyber smart young people. It's for everybody, because we need this wider audience of experts everywhere. Some of these young people, they only learn perhaps how to protect themselves in the future, or in better cases, they go home, share this knowledge with their families, their friends. Other ones perhaps get interested, continue their studies in IT sector, start working for us. A lot of these.
I was about to ask about this as well. Yeah. So okay, you have been organizing this event already for the last 2 years. How many people have? They're pretty young. We know some of them still go to high school and everything. But like, how many of them actually have you got to working for you later on, or maybe you can just bring it out some numbers in that side.
Yes, not only for us, but also for other companies who support us. We call it responsible community of private companies. There are, I believe, tens and tens of these school children who already project-based, still learning at schools or universities. They have started working for us. And the difficult part is that every once in a while we have to lecture them that, listen, you cannot drop out from school. This is the most important thing, because this cyber world sounds so interesting for them that they want to, they want to work for us. So we have to keep a good balance here as well.
Yeah. We also do have a high school in Pilistvere, right? It's our high school.
Yeah. They also.
Where it's actually a high school that teaches cybersecurity, and people come there. Mm-hmm. They want to go to the high school because they already envision a career in cybersec.
And I do know also that there is an issue, like you said, that some of them are just like, okay, I could drop off from school because like I already going to have a career and they're going to pay very well. That's the same case actually for Estonia, for like if you study at the university, so that sometimes they're taken away from the university already after 1 year, which is obviously not a good thing. And I know that also most of the tech companies are even paying for these cyber people to have an interviews, not even like to come and work for you, but to even have an interview. So that's also actually a massive problem, and shows again that we are really lacking these people that are like studying cyber or becoming a cyber professional as well. But now maybe to move on to the public-private partnership side, and let's jump back to Denmark. I mean, the collaboration between public and private in Denmark, I think it's also pretty good. But how do you see? Are there any improvements? What are the current like coolest projects that you do? You are based right now in a private sector point of view, but you have been on another side. Is there a need to have this collaboration more? What is the private sector eagering to have?
Seeing the collaboration as a good thing is kind of necessary. I love that you as a private company are doing society a service on behalf of the government, and it's not an issue, you just work together. We've seen a huge increase in Denmark, the Nordics, in protecting the companies, bigger companies. There's tons of regulations, EU regulations, national regulations, which raises the bar, which is good. But it's the minimum standards. We also saw the 400,000 small, medium businesses in Denmark not being part of that group. In recent years, we started increasingly focusing on how do we get awareness up, how do we incentivize all those companies, startups, to actually take cybersecurity serious. You can't regulate those companies because money is scarce. They're focusing everything on their product investments. So how do we build something up where we build the foundation also? So in Denmark, the Danish Industry Foundation has allotted a pool of money, a lot of money, supported by the Danish government and industry business organizations, where we share the costs. So if a small, medium business invests, let's say, 10,000 euros in a cybersecurity related activity, the foundation will double that amount. So we share the costs. We have coding privates where we take in IT people and increase their knowledge. We have private companies like my own who advise, sponsored by that foundation, also kind of going out and advise not how to buy the next black box that saves everything, but how to actually minimize your investments. So you invest in what is necessary and not just spend money. So we have the bigger companies are doing that, and it doesn't really do them well. As I started saying, sometimes you need to find out what can hurt your business, and there's a long list, and what can kill your business. If you focus your investments on what can kill your business, you spend your money wise. And you also start building that foundation, which is absolutely necessary when you grow. So I'm speaking about a shared responsibility here. It's not the MOD who's responsible for protecting this nation or my nation. It's also the private companies, regardless the size.
Yeah. And I guess also we need this kind of community of people as well that are working in the cyber field, and not just the startup sector itself. But I don't know how many of you here know that Estonia also, that you can do your military service in cybersecurity. So we have an option also that you don't have to join the usual military service, but you can also do that in cyber. And is there anybody here, any startup or business sector people that are part of our Cyber Defense League? Nobody? Okay, so there is 2 hands there, great. So we also have this kind of community called Cyber Defense League, where people that are working in cybersecurity in private sector are voluntary basis working there, so that if there is any kind of incident or anything happening, then we have the right to ask these people to come and also help us for protecting. You wanted to add something?
Well, I just want to point out that one of the fundamental problems of any government is that in terms of salaries, it's almost impossible to compete with the private sector. I remember I visited NSA in the US when General Keith Alexander headed it, and so he took me in, and he had all these guys working there, and I said, so is it a hard time keeping them? He said, it's his biggest problem in cybersecurity is keeping people in the military, if they were military, or at the NSA. Now, so one of the solutions, and one that actually has now been, that was started here, but has been copied in a number of places, from Latvia to Maryland in the United States, is the Cyber Defense League, in which people we have heads of unicorns down to bank sysadmins who will devote, say, a Thursday evening to working on cyber issues. So you get like real talents. They do it for free, but they, at the same time, there is a sense of patriotic duty. There's nothing to create a sense of patriotic duty like being attacked by a foreign country. And of course, this was something that came out of the 2007 DDoS attacks on Estonia, when we really took a much harder look at what it is that we need to do. And so one of the creations was the Cyber Defense League, which is equivalent to, we have a defense league. It's like the National Guard, or in Latvia, Semas. Guys who once a weekend, a month, will run around the woods with their guns. Well, these guys don't run around the woods with their guns. They meet in some place where there's a lot of computers, and they will work on issues, share ideas. But it's also part of the contribution that people voluntarily make to protect the security of the country.
You started talking about the 2007 attack against Estonia, and I would now use this last 7-8 minutes or so, and maybe we can talk about a little bit Ukrainian case as well. I get so mad every time that I read the news and see that people are saying, okay, there is nothing happening in the cyberspace in Ukraine at the moment. So all of the news are all over the things about what's happening in the physical space. Obviously, it's very essential, but not so much about the cyber, which I don't agree, because Ukraine has been in cyber war with Russia already since 2014. So maybe my question for you as well is that what could we learn from the cases that we see in Ukraine? Because what I'm saying is that Ukraine has done a tremendously good work in protecting themselves. So if we would talk about Ukraine 7 years ago, we would see much more happening in cyberspace. So they also have improved their infrastructure massively these years. But especially let's put it into the private sector point of view, because they are hit the worst. Okay, you can hit the infrastructure, but especially when we think about telcos or business and banking sector, they are hit the worst. So what can we take, or what kind of lessons can we take from the Ukrainian case right now? And
read the Microsoft report from 2 weeks ago. That's the best thing to do. If you want to know what they're doing, Microsoft published a report on cyber attacks against Ukraine. And as you correctly said, it's been ongoing, but it started 1 hour, the big attack started an hour before the physical invasion, and they actually hit telecommunications. But it didn't work, and it's because of how good the cyber defenses are. And as 2015, this has been there are lots of books on cybersecurity to discuss this. Basically, entire regions of Ukraine's electrical system was taken out. So if you read The Perfect Weapon by David, whatever his name was, this is this whole discussion of when this happens and the panic that ensues, that suddenly everything stops working. Well, those attacks have not stopped; they're ongoing. But we end up falling into these ridiculous sort of states of mind, and you get these articles. Well, it looks like the Russians are not using cyber at all, when in fact they're using that at a massive level. But this shows the efficacy of cyber resilience and cyber defense, and that's what I began with my statement, is that we too are under constant cyber attack because we're deemed one of the unfriendly countries. Finland, when it announced it was thinking about going to NATO, suddenly saw a jump in cyber attacks. Again, an effective cyber defense means that basically, nothing happens to you, but it's all happening out there.
Exactly. Peter, you also had...
Yeah, you can add that there's no surprise that ransomware is kind of the biggest threat against companies. That's ransomware 1.0 version, where they just steal or encrypt your data. And we see a militarization of state-sponsored cyber capabilities, where in Ukraine they went to actually destroy satellite components, which was used by military communication, but also by civilian communication, where the alleged Russian attack against Viasat actually influenced German wind turbines. Losing billions of dollars.
Well, the classic case is NotPetya, which was directed at Ukraine, and it cost a Danish company, I don't know how much?
Hundreds of billions of dollars, and the risk of losing all their clients, and totally new IT infrastructure. The point here is, how does the future look for all of us, not only governments but privates? We need to understand that we are all part of a supply chain. We're all part of supply chain. Governments who are against us will attack those supply chains, including you. So we need to beef up or take this responsible and kind of share the effort to protect not only the nation's infrastructure, but also what lies below, which is our businesses.
Yeah. Marki, you also wanted to comment on.
Yes, like everybody else, of course, we have been thinking as well at CTF Tech, what is that we can actually immediately do for perhaps to help to generate the next generation of cyber experts also in Ukraine, because they would help to build up a country in the future. When our experts are touring around Estonia right now, organizing or having trainings of Cyber Battle of Estonia, what we see at different trainings is a lot of Ukrainian students who are divided between Estonian schools taking part of these trainings, and this is something that they really like. And what teachers tell us is that this is a perfect way to integrate them, because they don't necessarily need to speak that much of Estonian in order to take part of these trainings and competitions. Plus, in the future, they would need it to build up their country.
All right. To sum it up, as we have only a few minutes to go here, what I always like to say is that let's get proactive with cybersecurity, because that's the only way to resist, or some way to resist attacks. So if I may start with you, Mr. President here, what would be your number one recommendation how to be and become proactive in cyberspace or cyber defense?
Read about it and get scared. I mean, basically, that's what again, David Sanger's the guy who wrote the book, The Perfect Weapon. Read that, and then you'll go, oh, Jesus. And unless the thing is, we're not afraid of these things because we're unaware of them, because the efforts work. But when you actually understand what has been done, you realize how vulnerable our societies are. We are so much more digital than we ever were. Again, because everything that makes life much easier because it's digitized, in the way it has been digitized within 20 years, those things make us also more vulnerable. And so for the first thing really is awareness. I mean, I know it's cool and hip and people, young people like to do it and all, but I would say that really the first step to becoming interested in cybersecurity is becoming aware of how dangerous it can be.
Great.
One thing, okay.
You have 20 seconds.
Okay, protect your investments. Focus on protecting what can kill your business, and then train as you fight. We know you will get hit. You know you'll get hit. The day you train it shouldn't be the first at the actual attack. So train it before, like running a marathon. You just don't run a marathon. You train before.
Marki, your last remarks.
Yeah, obviously my final pitch is let's shape the next generation of cyber experts. Let's shape it, the future world. Let's do it together, combine our forces, and obviously I would like to see you all attending the final of Cyber Battle of Estonia in Tartu in the end of October, to see it with your own eyes. How can we educate our students and young people to be beneficial for us in the future?
All right, then to sum it up here, thank you very much. And I would say let's get scared, let's get educated, and let's build a little bit more safer cyberspace so that your wonderful solution can operate every day and function as well as possible. So thank you very much from my side, and I wish you a very nice rest of the conference here.